Right.
I wish that someone had told me you can log off. I wish that someone had set those boundaries with me when I was younger in my career. I wish the narrative hadn't been if you work just a little bit harder and do a little bit more, you'll get that promotion. Like those promised promotions, I think, are such a driver for high achieving women in particular that it can be hard to see past it because you're like, this is the thing that I'm working towards. But they're kind of used as a little carrot. They're used to just dangle in front of you. And no one is talking about the effects of what working 70-hour work weeks and sitting in back-to-back calls and just constantly stressing yourself out to the point where your cortisol levels are through the roof, where you're exhausted, where you can barely focus anymore actually does to you.
Welcome to Side Note, the podcast, where we empower ambitious women with new perspectives. I'm Samantha Fackler, your host. Join me for off-the-cuff conversations with the most authentic people I can find. Entrepreneurs, creatives, authors, visionaries. We welcome you as you are and hope you leave with what you need. This is Side Note, the podcast where big ideas become real. Welcome to Side Note, the podcast. Today we are graced with the beauty, Regan, and she is the founder of Organized Chaos, which is a confidence mentorship platform. Now, Regan and I go way back. We used to work together, 6 years ago?
I can't
I
believe
know.
it's been 6 years.
I know. And so much has happened since. So tell our listeners a little bit about what you're up to today.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much for having me, by the way. I was so excited to hear that this podcast had launched. I know you've been talking about this for a very long time, at least ideating on it. And so it's so cool to get to see friends in the industry be able to go and launch their own dreams. So congrats. I wanted to say that officially on the podcast on Side Note.
Thank
Um,
you.
you're welcome. So, Sam introed me. Hi, I'm Regan. I am the founder of Organized Chaos, which is a confidence mentorship platform. I started Organized Chaos because I'm angry that mental health is not talked about more at work. And I want us to be able to continue to have that conversation. Women in particular, when it comes to work, have a huge amount of anxiety and overwhelm. And there are so many strategies and tactics that we can use in our day to day in order to help us feel more in control of our lives, in order for us to really understand the emotions that we're experiencing and start to build success on our own terms. And that's exactly what I'm doing over on Organized Chaos. I have a bi-weekly podcast. I am very active on social media. And then, as I told Sam a little bit earlier, this is my new biggest news. I am in the middle of getting my life coaching accreditation. So I will start to take on some one-on-one clients and run workshops here shortly, which is very exciting for Organized Chaos.
That's awesome. It's such important work too, because I think you and I have both gone through a journey where anxiety has flared up and it's been a sign to reorient or change course in some way. And I've
Yeah.
seen you have like such a touch of excellence on everything you do. Like from, when we worked together, you were in the event space, just like I want to paint the picture for everyone, okay? When I met Regan, we were like in this conference that our company was running. There were probably 100 people, mainly dudes, mainly like older guys
White
who,
dudes.
old white guys, yeah, let's be real.
Yeah.
And Regan
Call a
was
spade a
just
spade.
like, you were brand new and you came in and you were this little rocket around the conference room, like telling people what to do and taking charge and absolutely crushing it. And I was like, who is this girl? And you lived in Europe and you were like in town in New York, like for the week. And then I watched you go on this journey and you kind of went off on your own and you were still like working in the marketing space, but now you've completely obviously pivoted. Take me back to the moment when you were like, I don't know if this marketing stuff is the right fit, and I think this other area of work is calling me.
Great question. And you will always make me blush when you tell that story. So thank you. Um, I can't believe we met 6 years ago. It is wild to think of how much can happen in 6 years. And I'll take you back a little bit further, but I'll try to keep it succinct. So I I knew that something was up when I started to have these anxiety attacks and what were actually panic attacks a couple times a day. Like I had gotten to the point when I was still working in corporate where before I would go into a meeting, I would need to spend about 10, 15 minutes really grounding myself because I was so anxious and I was so nervous that what I was going to say was going to be wrong and I wasn't doing things right. And I was trying to climb this corporate ladder of success and it just didn't make sense to me anymore. But if you had asked me, 3 years ago, what my definition of success was, it was going to be get to the top of that corporate ladder. Like I wanted to be a CMO, and I saw nothing in my way of getting to that goal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not sustainable. I mean, having those panic attacks is not sustainable. Crying all the time is not sustainable. And that anxiety takes a huge toll on your body. And so I went, all right, I have to quit. I need to quit this job. And I thought I was going to just dive into marketing consulting. I thought that's what I was going to go and do next. Little did I know my body had a very different plan for me. And I actually ended up spending about 6 months on the couch in complete and total burnout. Like if you think of the symptoms of burnout, that was me. It was crying, headaches, stomach aches, nausea, um, exhaustion. I mean, my poor husband, Philip, like he was just such a rock during that time, but I was just trying to keep myself afloat. And I think I'm kind of the poster child for what it looks like when you push your body to the mega limit. And it's never is something I never ever want to do again. I had done it one other time in my career. It wasn't as bad, but I had done it previously and I said the same exact thing then as I am now, but now I have different tools in my toolkit to make sure that really doesn't happen again. So I kind of reached the end of that time and went, all right, I'm ready to start to go back to work. I'm ready to, figure out like what is really going to happen now. Now, I had already started building what was probably my personal brand. I just really focused it around Web3 and what I was doing before and marketing and was thought a really natural next step was going to be let's just jump back into marketing consulting. That's what I wanted to do. And so that's what I'm going to go and do now. And that's where you and I started chatting again. I started working with companies, helping them build their marketing programs, jumping in as a short-term fractional CMO for some really, really early stage startups to help them build some of those foundational plans. And I liked that. But there was something calling to me that said, this just isn't what you're meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought I had already invested so much time and energy into doing that that I kind of ignored that voice for a minute and went, but I can't change course because I'm Regan the marketer. That's what people know me as. I'm Regan the marketer, right?
It's what you've
Like it's
always
hard.
done. Right. It's what you've always done. It's a big story that is a part of you.
Absolutely. And if you continue to tell yourself this story over and over again, that rewriting your own story can be really difficult. But there's so much beauty in the process of rewriting your own story. And I forgot about that piece. And so one day I woke up and I went, I need to do something different. Now, what have I always done? What do people tell me I'm actually quite good at? And what do people tell me I do that kind of defines who I am? And the conversation around mental health has followed me throughout my life because it's this continuing learning journey. And I went, if we had been able to talk about mental health more at work, I most likely could have stopped myself from burning out to the extent that I did. That's not me not taking responsibility for the burnout because I definitely take responsibility for it. But I
Right.
wish that someone had told me you can log off. I wish that someone had set those boundaries with me when I was younger in my career. I wish the narrative hadn't been if you work just a little bit harder and do a little bit more, you'll get that promotion. Like those promised promotions, I think, are such a driver for high achieving women in particular that it can be hard to see past it because you're like, this is the thing that I'm working towards, but they're kind of used as a little carrot. They're used to just dangle in front of you. And no one is talking about the effects of what working 70-hour work weeks and sitting in back-to-back calls and just constantly stressing yourself out to the point where your cortisol levels are through the roof, where you're exhausted, where you can barely focus anymore actually does to you. And so at that point, I said, I need to start talking about this. I started talking about it. People online actually really liked it, and I loved it. And that is how Organized Chaos came to be.
That's beautiful. It's
Thanks.
There are so many things I want to dig into there.
I
First
know.
off, the fact that you were having multiple, would you say they were anxiety attacks or panic attacks?
They were both. So I've
Oh,
had panic attacks throughout my whole life and
yeah.
thought I lost my sister when I was 18, and it really started at that point. And, I thought I'd become friends with them. I thought I understood them. I thought they weren't a thing that I experienced anymore, but they were definitely a mix of panic and anxiety because they're two different things. Anxiety attacks feel like there's a really heavy weight on your chest, but you're still lucid. Whereas a panic attack is kind of this black wall that comes in front of you, and it's very difficult to separate like yourself from reality.
Yeah, yeah. It's so fascinating. And I'm so sorry to hear about your sister and, kind of
Me
what are the
too.
triggers of these. It's so tough. Anxiety attacks are so scary, and I really can't imagine having multiple a day. I had a series of them between 2013 and 2018, but I remember the first one I got, I left work. I was on the street, like the streets of San Francisco, downtown. I left work and I felt like I was having a heart attack because that pressure,
Yeah.
like you were saying. So I took a lift to the ER and I was like, I don't know what's happening. And then
Yeah.
they later told me it was an anxiety attack. So yeah, to have multiple a day, I mean, that's so intense to have burnout for so long. That is really taxing on the body. So then you pivoted your business and your content's incredible. Like you are sharing so many helpful things around managing stress and anxiety, regulating your nervous system. You also share incredible content around your bunnies. We have to talk about your bunnies now.
Oh, yes.
They seriously bring me so much peace just to see videos of them. It's like
Okay, well, I need to upload more videos then because I just don't feel like there's enough bunny content out there.
you do. You absolutely do. There's one of like you were showing the bunnies on a train you were taking because for our listeners, Regan lives in Amsterdam and she has like
Oh,
the
yes.
cutest apartment home I've ever seen. It's like the coolest. Like it has that like slanted roof at the top. Ugh,
Hmm.
it's just so idyllic and beautiful.
Thank
But the
you.
bunny content, I mean, the bunnies are next level.
I'll tell you about the bunnies. Do you want to hear about the bunnies?
Yeah.
So the bunnies were actually one of our attempts at, I think one, like Philip and I wanted to take our relationship to the next level. As you do, you're like, let's get a pet together. And then two, um, I was like, we need something to occupy our time other than work. We're working so much. And the bunnies were a great way to achieve that. So we get these two cute little bunnies. Now, if you don't know much about bunnies, you don't think bunnies are high maintenance until you get them, and they are very high maintenance, but they are so cute that it just like doesn't matter anymore. But so we got these two, and they run around our house like a cat or a dog would. So they're completely litter trained. They just hop around normally during the day. And if you watch the podcast, they're normally sleeping under my desk or like any of the content that I film. They're kind of like right next to me or nearby or running around in the background. You'll catch because I just can't control them. But they really do. They bring me so much peace too. And I just sit and I watch them and they're so calm and they clean their face. Like if I might have videos up of them cleaning their face. If I don't, I need to put more videos up because they sit up like little humans on their back legs and they go like they just start cleaning their it's so
Oh my
it just makes my
God.
heart melt every time. I love them so much. But so we ended up one thing I didn't add into my story is we get the bunnies and I started having those anxiety attacks again. And then I quit my job and Philip and I looked at each other and when we need to do something different, why don't we add an extra layer of stress and move around Europe for 6 months? And so we took our bunnies and each other and like six suitcases and traveled around because we were living in London at the time. We traveled around Spain, Italy, and France for 6 months before moving to Amsterdam. And so we just added that like extra layer of spice into our lives along with the rabbits. And that is where you saw a picture or a video of us free roaming the bunnies on Train Italia.
Train Italia. It was
They were not
so
happy.
cute.
Okay, wait, can I just tell a really quick side note story?
Yeah.
So, side note,
Side
uh,
note.
I, um, So normally on the train, we would put them in this little vest. It's like you can't put them in a collar because their necks are they're too fragile. So you put them in a little vest and we have a leash for them. I kid you
That's
not.
so cute.
It's so fucking cute. And so they go in this bag and we go and we put them underneath our seat. And the train was smaller than we originally expected. We thought we were going to have a bigger seat and it was fine. So it's under our seat and it's kind of laid out like a bus. We're like it's rows of two and we're all sat in front of and behind each other. And Philip, for some reason, lets S'mores, our one bunny, because he has a little black mark on his face, he looks like a s'mores. It lets him jump out with his leash on and then lets go of his leash and he starts sprinting 12 rows behind us underneath people's feet.
Oh
And so
my
you
God.
just have this like group of like French, Italian, like, just generally European people being like, there's underneath me, freaking out. And I was like, it's a bunny. And Philip's running through the aisle trying to catch him. And it was just total chaos. But it's a really good insight into our life because Philip and I are so organized. Like normally we're just so organized, but then you just have those moments where you're like, what the fuck is happening? We have these rabbits in these suitcases. And like, just get me to where we're trying to go.
It had its vest and leash on still though, so it was organized chaos.
It was organized chaos, but I don't think rabbits have enough brain cells to recognize them, but they are very cute.
That's hilarious.
Needed to tell the
Oh.
side note.
No, absolutely. I mean, there are certain things you can't control, right? You can't
Mhm.
control some parts of your body and how they're going to react to stress, like you were saying, burnout.
Yep.
You can't control everything that happens, death for one will come knocking at people's doors at unexpected times. I know we were talking about that before this episode started. And I think you've talked about this, but grief has been a huge part of kind of your motivation and the background of your work too. I guess if someone were to show up and they're like, I feel like I am struggling with confidence, I'm struggling with self-esteem, and I also have this big boulder on my back called grief, and it kind of decides when it wants to act up and when it wants to calm down. How would you go about, advising someone like that?
It's such a good question and such a hard question at the same time. So, grief is so unique to each individual that I'll do my best job answering with the way that I look at it.
Please.
Um, so I've dealt with grief many times in my life, and grief comes in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. I think there's grief with losing a job. There's grief with losing a loved one. There's grief with hurting yourself, with losing a pet. There's grief of all different kinds. And they show up in your life and in your emotions and reactions in different ways. And it also depends on who you are and what kind of coping mechanisms you have. No matter what, though, grief sucks. Like it just does.
Yeah.
And recognizing that is not meant to be a demotivating thing. It actually, I think, can be quite empowering to stand there and say, no, grief fucking sucks. Like it is one of the worst things that we can go through, especially if you're losing someone who's close to you. I lost my sister when I was 18. I lost my grandfather when I was 20, and I lost my dad suddenly last year. So grief and we're all buddies by now. Doesn't mean I like it, but it means that I can recognize that there is a cycle with all of this. And the most beautiful way that I've heard grief described to me is normally you hear that grief is there are a series of steps with grief. You have anger, you have denial, but what it is in reality is more like a ball of yarn that you need to unravel. And the ball can have these knots and twists and turns, and it's not all neatly put into this little package that makes it easy to unwrap. And that's exactly what happens. I mean, some mornings you'll wake up and you are happy, and you're like, why the fuck am I happy? Some mornings you'll wake up and you hate everything. Some mornings you will wake up and be confused that this thing has happened. The thing with grief, though, is it inherently makes you start to take stock of your life and question, what am I doing here? And it comes in different ways at different ages. When I was 18, I wasn't really asking the question of what am I doing here? What was I meant to do on this earth? Instead, it was like, I haven't done enough as a teenager. Instead, it was, no one really understands me. Whereas the grief I feel now is more, why am I here? Like, we spend 90,000 hours at work. We're on this floating rock. Why am I actually here? Like, why am I not doing something that brings me joy every single day, even if it's not immense joy, right? That's unrealistic. But why am I not doing something that actually makes me happy? Why am I continuing these patterns that were given to me, but they were never really decided on? And so in a funky way, grief and confidence can actually be linked. I have seen so many people go through the journey of heading one direction, and then they have a big moment of grief in their life. And like I said, grief can also come from losing a job that you thought you loved. And then all of a sudden they go, this isn't what I want anymore. This isn't who I am anymore. And they change. So if someone's coming to me and saying, I'm already dealing with confidence, which is a thing so many of us feel, right? Like, especially as women, we're told to act a certain way our entire lives. It's unrealistic to think that we can just wake up one morning and be like, nope, I'm not going to act that way anymore. Now I'm going to go act this other way. Like, it's hard to be confident. It's hard to show up as yourself. People make it sound so easy. It's not. It's totally possible, but like, it takes time. And so like confidence is already so hard. And if you were then adding this layer of grief on top of it, I'm going to say the cliche thing of, one, tell me about it. Like, let's talk about it. Have the conversation with people that you're close to. But two, take it one day at a time. The grief is really the thing that you need to focus on, because until you're able to just see through the fog that grief throws at you, like a grieving brain is not your normal brain. Like, studies actually show that grief changes the shape of your brain. And so your brain is changing sizes, your brain is changing shape, it's changing form, and you're going to need to be able to move through that, and that is okay. So my advice would be, give yourself that space. And that's always my advice, give yourself that space, but especially if you're adding in that extra layer of grief.
Yeah. I am so happy this is recorded because that was excellent answer.
Thanks.
And thank you for walking us through that. Seriously, from the beginning, all those different reminders that our journey is individual, the way that we deal with grief is individual. I will never forget that ball of yarn analogy because that's really it, right? It's always different. And I think going back to what you shared earlier and what I can relate to too is like we both at some point saw ourselves on a track to become CMOs. And I remember I had a moment of grief that reoriented that. And I was like, wait, why do I even want that? And that was more of my ego and also what I've been told what looks successful. Like being a CMO is successful. It's so fascinating. And when we dig into that, like taking it one day at a time, I know that you've done a lot of research and a lot of work on different things that help you regulate your nervous system, whether it's grief, whether it's stress and anxiety, whether it's preventing panic attacks. What is a method for managing your emotions that you have found surprisingly effective?
Ooh, so many come to mind. I'm going to quickly plug my functional nutritionist. Her name's Isla Rain. She has changed my life. Like, I would be doing a disservice to myself and her if I didn't mention that tackling everything going on in my gut has regulated my nervous system and my anxiety like no other.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes. And I can talk about all these other things that I do on a day-to-day basis. But I'll kind of go back a little bit. At the beginning of this year, I went, all right, I've like figured out my emotions. I not figured them out, but like I feel stable enough in my emotions where I can move on to something else. I've been seeing a therapist for 3 years. I, feel very, very comfortable with where I am. We've pivoted over to organized chaos, but I was like, my gut has been bothering me forever. I have celiac disease. I have always just been like a nauseous, anxious ball of something's going on in my system that I don't know, girly, and got recommended Isla Rain. And we sat down and we started talking. And I was like, I really want to figure out my hormones and figure out what's going on. I think it's probably my cortisol levels and my adrenals and blah, blah, blah. And I was just kind of spewing jargon at her. And she was like, okay, I need you to take this GI map test first, because until we can figure out what's happening in your system, there's we can't start on your hormones. We have to start with what's happening in your gut. And I had already done a lot of research on the mind gut connection, but actually experiencing it firsthand just reinforced all of it. Your gut microbiome intertwines with your emotions, your anxiety, your fear, your body pain in ways that you just never even thought were possible. And you can have things going on in your gut, even if you walk around every single day and go, no, I think I feel pretty good, because you're probably just used to it. Or you're assuming it's something happening in your cycle. And so that's what I worked on for the last 8 months was what's happening. I eradicated like a bunch of bacteria in my gut, which sounds gross, but like we all have it.
Yeah.
And then as I was doing that, Isla went, okay, now we cannot start on your hormones until you have figured out your stress levels, Regan. Like, I love you, but we have to figure that out. And so it sent me down a whole other rabbit hole, because I went, no, my stress levels are pretty good. But what her and I started discussing, what I started researching and realizing is it was the somatic stress levels. It was the tension actually held in my body. It wasn't just the racing thoughts in my mind. It was a lot of that leftover tension that had sat there for years. And I started doing a ton of other things, which we can also talk about. But the most surprising part was we can't really focus on anything else until we focus on your gut and at least started to lower those stress levels. But your gut's going to be a major, major factor there.
Interesting. I mean, that makes so much sense. They say that you have neurons in your gut, in your heart,
Yeah.
and they all connect to each other. So it makes sense that taking care of your gut then takes care of your brain, which then takes care of your stress and anxiety and
Yeah.
hormones. It's so fascinating. And
It
so
is incredible, because
yeah,
also, sorry, not to interrupt,
go.
but the other thing I wanted to add is if your body is sending time and attention towards your gut, it's going to be difficult for it to send time and attention towards other areas.
Mm.
And right? Because you only have so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, of course, you're feeling anxious if your body is focusing all its time and energy on trying to digest food through your system, or make sure you're not getting an ulcer, or trying to reduce your bloating, or I don't even know, sitting there and being like, you continue to eat dairy, but I'm telling you not to eat dairy. Please, will you stop eating dairy? Like all of these things are going to end up contributing to our stress and anxiety levels, not only because of the symptoms that we're experiencing, but also because your body's not going to be able to turn the energy towards helping you regulate.
Yeah, no, completely. I'm also a dairy-free girl, so I'm in that camp.
I am
And it's
luckily not.
okay, that's good. You also
I just
literally
know that
live
has
in
something.
you live in a land of cheese. You can't be dairy-free.
I can't be dairy free. I don't need to be dairy free, which is I'm very, very grateful for, because I need to be free of a lot of other things. I'm histamine free. Which like you could argue dairy has histamines, but we're going to ignore that. Already having celiac, so I'm like, I can't eliminate other things right now. It's just not happening.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I love working with women like that who give you a totally new perspective on, hey, this thing is actually working behind the scenes on the thing that you're focused on. So let's give this a go and then see how it affects the whatever's on center stage.
Yes.
You mentioned that there were some other things that were surprisingly effective besides the focus on the gut. maybe one more that you want to share with our audience.
Yeah. One thing I want to caveat with though is I recognize I'm extremely privileged to be able to go and see all of these people. I'm super privileged to have the opportunity to see my therapist on a weekly basis, to be able to work with someone like Isla who has a very specialized skill, and to be able to work with the person that I'm about to mention. Not everyone has that option. And there are so many different things that you can do on your own. I know Isla even has resources that you can download. A lot of these functional nutritionists have free resources for you. I upload a lot of content around how you can balance your nervous system, reduce your anxiety. Like there are small steps that you can take. And even if you don't start with your gut, right? Like that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means you're doing it a different way. And I know I said a pretty intense statement of you can't start until you feel your gut. Like, yes, but kind of. There's always a caveat. There's always something that you can kind of change. And so I don't want anyone listening and being like, oh, I can't afford that, or that's not me, or I'm not ready for that yet. Like, go and start to do some research because the free resources available online are incredible. And then figure out what's important to you and what you want to start trying, or even if you do. So I wanted to start there because I think that's important. The other thing that I started trying was I went and saw a somatic acupuncturist for about 6 months last year, which I'd never, have you ever heard of a somatic acupuncturist?
Never. No.
Yeah. Have you ever done acupuncture?
I do acupuncture, and I have found that different, like this acupuncturist that I see now, I feel like the effects more intensely than acupuncture
Ooh,
I've done in the past. I think there's probably a couple reasons for that. One, I'm more connected to my body now. I'm
yeah.
much more aware of my body, so therefore I am more aware of the effects, where before I
Mm.
think that connection was a bit weaker. But I didn't know that there was somatic acupuncture specifically. So what is that?
I I didn't either. So a somatic acupuncturist will sit down with you and talk to you about where you're feeling pain in your body. That somatic stress that I was talking about earlier directly correlates to the work that I did with her because she would sit and say, I obviously care about how you're feeling, but for this instance, I don't care how you're feeling. Like I don't care what emotions you're having. I care what pain you're having because she worked backwards. She went, you're having stomach aches, you're having heart pain, you're having headaches. Let's try to release the tension from those specific areas through a mix of somatic exercises like grounding my feet and walking, like walking on all fours, like walking with my eyes closed. What else? There was stretching that we did. There was like dancing that we did and acupuncture and then energy work as well. So she really combined. It was super cool. I am normally not like I am very I try to take like a really objective mindset on anything that I do and not jump on the bandwagon. So in this instance, I was a little like wary at first, but once I started working with her and started feeling the effects, I couldn't go back. And I loved working with her. Never heard about it before. It was so cool.
That is so cool. And it's so fascinating how we all find different resources to manage these types of things. Like
Yeah.
I found, I was very skeptical of Reiki before I found Reiki energy healing. But my anxiety was so bad. It was 2020, I remember, specifically around the election then. And
Oof, yeah.
that's what drew me to Reiki because I was like, you know what? I don't care. This thing like looks kind of weird. I don't know if I believe in it, but I'm gonna give it a go and try it. And it made me feel so grounded, so much more connected and clear. And then I ended up getting trained in it, and then I ended up turning it into a business. Now I feel like I do community events once a month with it, but I actually have
Mhm.
found a way to bring it into my coaching. So when I coach clients,
So cool.
sometimes I can naturally, intuitively feel as they're describing certain situations to me, like the energy of their business or the team member or whatever it is, the situation. And then we can start to figure out, okay, how do we weave in a more helpful pattern here and kind of move this energy out? So I'm interested to see how all of these things that you have been exploring make their way into your work, especially after
Me
your
too.
certification.
Me too. I and I think that's what makes each individual coach so special is they get to bring in their own life experiences, and that's why someone works with a coach, right?
Mhm.
Like they go I love Sam because she has this experience and this experience, and I want someone to be able to connect with me on an energetic level. And she makes that a priority. Whereas not every coach is going to be able to do that. They don't have your experience, they don't have your attitude. And so I'm very excited as well to be able to see how it integrates into my own practice. I knew, I don't think I knew that you had been trained in Reiki. Like I knew that you did it. I don't know why. I just didn't connect those two dots together. That is so
Mm.
cool.
Thank you. I didn't talk about it for the longest time because I was afraid of
Yeah.
judgment. I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard. It's kind of hard to like come out of the spiritual closet in that way and be like, yeah,
Hmm.
I actually do like know how to move energy and I can feel people's energy and
So cool.
tap into it. But I think, I don't know, the way that we grew up, that stuff was viewed as very woo-woo and crazy and out there. I think it's becoming much more normal today. I mean, I did my yoga teacher training kind of for fun, and there were a lot of young
Cool.
people in it, and they were so like, they just tossed around these terms like they were normal. And the fact that the word like manifestation is now in the zeitgeist normally, it blows my mind because that
Yep. Yep.
spoke that word 10 years ago, people would be like, okay, you know? So that's something
I
that I'm
remember sitting in a
battling.
meeting early on in my career and someone mentioned the word manifestation. And I even sat there and a couple coworkers and I looked at each other like, do we believe this person now? Which is just, it's so unfair. It's so unfair because I am now in the camp of if it helps you, who am I to say anything? Like I
Yeah,
can't say anything if it helps you. And just because I can't link to it doesn't mean it's not real.
right. Yeah, completely. And I think everyone has their own psychological framework, and that informs everything for them. So for me, I feel like I do still have 2 feet firmly on earth in like our material
I do
world.
too.
And like I love business and I love like normal human things, even like these
Yeah,
emotions like grief and just these things that really connect us to like our bodies as humans, right? So I think the work that you're doing is beautiful. I love that we both ended up in kind of this similar world
we
and
do.
space and had this parallel journey, but very unique paths. Is there any question that you have for me?
Yes. I'm just going to ask you because I feel like we all need to talk about our successes more and what's next in our business more. What is next? What's next for you? Like, what are you working on right now? I feel like you just had a big announcement and I should know this off the top of my head. Do you want to re-say it to me so that I can celebrate
Thank you. That's really sweet of you to ask.
you?
A couple of big things recently. I mean, we're recording this at like around the fall equinox. A lot of change is happening. And
Yeah.
I had a big week last week, like a lot of flow in my business in many different ways. Podcast was launched. I hired a team member to help me with marketing so I can unlock more time for clients and the stuff that really matters.
Hmm.
I also launched a mastermind for women entrepreneurs who are building their businesses, kind of like
So
that
cool.
earlier stage, years 1 to 3. Maybe they're around 6 figures or trying to get there. Maybe they're past, but they're kind of like, how do I scale things up, make things bigger? And that's awesome because I've been a part of masterminds and they're the reason why I have a successful business, 100%.
That's
And
awesome.
I have spent more on masterminds than anything else in my business, but it's been worth it because I never would have been able to get through like the emotional stuck points or the fears or the doubts without that group to lean on. And I think they've also kind of fast tracked my business because when you're learning from people that are doing something similar to you, you are all constantly learning things, but when you compound that knowledge, all of you move faster because it's like, oh, I did this thing that you're about to do. This is what I learned. So this is what to do and what not to do. And then, of course, you apply that to your individual experience. So I'm super excited about the mastermind. It's a year long. Enrollment will continue through November, and then we'll probably close it off. It'll be 10 people max. We meet twice a week. We have a guest expert come in each month because I don't know everything. No one knows everything. So we're bringing in people and we're curating those guest experts to talk about topics that the group wants to know more about. So systems, finance, hiring, but also like energy healing, like all sorts of things. We'll probably have a practitioner come in. We might have more than one guest expert per month. And then the thing that I really love is that we have like an asynchronous group chat. So at any time, if you're like waking up and you have a ton of anxiety and you don't know why, or you're feeling stuck around a launch, you can like share that with the group. And it's like, we'll have your back. Like, I'll be coaching you. You'll also have the support from these other women. And then I want to have, it'll be optional for the group, but I want to have a retreat. So in person, a weekend, like all the luxury feels, like beautiful dinners, time for connection, time for working on your own, doing your own thing. So I
Mhm.
love it. It's called the Greenhouse. I'm really excited about it. So that's the latest thing.
Sam, that's freaking huge. That's amazing. Okay, did not realize all that went into that. So cool. I'm so glad that I know, and I'm really glad I asked. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Thanks for
welcome.
asking too. That was so nice
Of
of
course.
you.
Of course. I feel like when you're on your own podcast, you market yourself and you talk about the cool things that you're doing, but it's so different when you can just have a conversation with someone. And so I
Yeah.
loved that I could ask you and be like, no, champion yourself right now.
Thank you. I know
Yay.
I like asking guests, like, can you ask me a question?
Yeah.
Because it's a conversation, not
Yeah.
an interrogation. So
I mean, you can interrogate me, it's fine. Interrogate me about my bunnies. I will always, always answer. No, but I hear you. Like, it's much more fun when it can be an organic conversation.
yeah. Oh, Regan, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so grateful for you, your energy, the work that you're doing, all the bunny pictures we need more of. Please plug your stuff so that we can follow along.
Oh, absolutely. If you would like to learn more about how to manage your mental health at work and start the conversation around anxiety, please follow me. I'm active on most social media channels, but primarily LinkedIn and Instagram. You can find me at regan.oelze on both of those channels. I can send them to you so that they end up in the show notes,
Yep.
hopefully.
It'll be in the show notes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Start
Okay.
there, and then I'll keep you all updated on how my coaching journey goes.
Please do. Maybe we'll have you
I
on
will.
after and speak more to like client stories and what you're seeing as a life
Yeah,
coach.
that would be amazing. I would love that.
Okay. Thank you, Regan.
Thank you so much, Sam, for having me. This was so much fun. I love this conversation.
I did too. And thank you all for listening to Side Note. Please leave a rating. When you put stars on the podcast, you put stars literally in my eyeballs. So those
Mhm.
ratings and reviews go a really long way.
Oh,
And
hell yeah.
we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.